Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com, Real Ag Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's time to talk biofuels. We've got some exciting news on the biofuels front in Canada. Joining us right now from Greenfield Global, it is Andrea Kent. Andrea, it's great to chat with you.
Oh, so great to talk to you too. Thanks.
Okay, so what's the big news? We got a new organization that's going to be advocating and lobbying on the behalf of the biofuel industry. What exactly is going on here?
Absolutely. And frankly, I don't think it could come at a much better time either. But Greenfield is really proud to be partnering with Alco Canada, formerly IGPC Ethanol, and our partners in grain farming to launch the Farms and Fuels Alliance Canada. And what this is going to be doing is really coming together in a very focused, very aligned way to champion Canada's homegrown ethanol sector. So, looking at everything that we've built up to date in terms of our domestic production, the innovation that Canada has brought to its ethanol production, all the rural communities and jobs that we've been serving, really, over the past couple of decades, and really helping policymakers not just appreciate everything that we've done to date, but really put a much more focused lens on some of the things that we should be doing.
Mm.
We're facing some pretty serious and glaring challenges and policy gaps. We have put in place some really impressive foundations when you look at policies that encourage the use of low carbon fuels, and ethanol is the most affordable one. And we have an abundant supply of corn that we can use to produce it here at home. But the reality is that there are some loopholes there that are not ensuring that the domestic benefits that should be coming with ethanol production are all reaching their full potential here. And a unified voice of Farms and Fuels Alliance is really going to be able to have that conversation in a much more meaningful, much more direct way, and complement some of the other work that our partners are doing.
What would be the equivalent sister organization? Just we get for people that are following the biofuels industry, we hear a lot about biofuels from obviously the U.S. sector, where that's it's a big deal, and Canada does have an opportunity to grow domestically indeed. But what would be an example of like a sister organization, just so people get the equivalent?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say probably Canada is a bit different in that we don't organize our biofuels groups according to a fuel or even a feedstock.
Mm.
So this will really be the first time that there is just an ethanol specific sector group coming together in this way in Canada. But certainly in the US, a lot of work has already been done by the Renewable Fuels Association, Growth Energy. Those are ethanol focused. Here in Canada, like I said, we've been, kind of small enough where we've been able to all kind of exist in these larger tents. But now is really just a time where I think, we've got a world-class ethanol industry here at home. We're doing amazing things for our farm communities. And we really just need to have a stronger, more focused voice to tell that story more directly.
Now you mentioned some of the founding members. Are you looking to increase that membership?
I absolutely hope so. I think when you launch something like this, and again, it really is to strengthen the existing biofuels industry advocacy here in Canada. We're not replacing anything. We want to be very complementary. But when you do something that's a little bit different, sometimes you just bring in your closest core partners, which is what we've done here. So both with Greenfield and Alco Canada in Elmer, formerly IGPC.
Mm.
Those are really, two of our largest dedicated ethanol producers, very well established. And then obviously our grain growers. But hopefully, more people who are directly part of the ethanol sector here will join. You'll see on the website as well too. There's going to be an option just for individual growers or individual Canadians to sign up as well and be part of our newsletter group to get more information on FFA and what we're doing. So definitely, room to grow, but looking at, how can we really start this off right and make it very clear and lay a foundation.
So, understanding that the organization is advocating for the interests of not only members of the GFO, people that are producing corn in Canada or in more specifically Ontario in the case of the GFO and the processor. What are we? What is the organization advocating for? What needs to happen for the ethanol industry in Canada to take that next step?
Absolutely. We've been doing a really great, job when you look at, all of the direct environmental benefits that ethanol provides, looking at, the injection and kind of the anchoring of a lot of rural communities. We've been at the forefront of that effort for a long time. But that doesn't mean to say that it can remain status quo, especially in this global environment where, we have new pressures and we have new contexts in which we have to function. So really, when you kind of look at, the strategy and objectives that I think are top of mind for the sector right now, how do we strengthen Canadian policy? So, we have decades long renewable fuels policy in Canada and the US. We have some new programs in both Canada and the US that have come to light recently, like within the last, 5 to 6 years. They take a different approach. When you look at something like the US IRA, that is an industrial policy. That is looking at ensuring that domestic capacity in the US is growing and continues to innovate. We took a different approach here in Canada, really focusing first and foremost on just emissions reductions. But we haven't kept pace in looking at the economic side of it. We need to strengthen Canadian policy. These things just have to be modernized. And there are some loopholes that exist for international and foreign growers and producers to benefit under our policies
Mm.
that we just don't have the same type of access to. So I think, first is looking at Canadian policy, strengthening what we have, figuring out how to complement it and continue to drive domestic benefits as close to, the Canadian plant, as close to the Canadian farm as we can. We need this voice to help champion for fair practices as well. Policies should be balanced. And when you look at, kind of aligning Canadian priorities of, energy reliability, affordability, local job creation, and investment, that really is something that we can help with and we have answers for. It's just that, there needs to be a champion for these fair practices. And I really think that the Farms and Fuels Alliance can do that. And then ultimately it's all about, driving, investment and rural revitalization. So, it really is kind of going back to the roots in a lot of ways when you look at the Canadian Renewable Fuels Association and the origin story of Renewable Industries Canada, right? This is a group that's been around for over 30 years. It really did start as a rural economic policy between corn farmers and, a really at the time nascent ethanol industry. So in a lot of ways, it's just going back to our roots and looking at that shared strategy. Like, how do we strengthen our policies here at home? How do we make sure that our farmers and producers have a champion for fair practices? And how do we continue to drive that rural economic activity as close to our home base as we can?
Clearly, there's room for growth for ethanol production in Canada. If you just look at Canada's the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just Canada buys a lot of U.S. ethanol. 30% of U.S. ethanol exports go to Canada. It's the largest market. Do you think that the ethanol industry has it needs to raise the profile just in general, even amongst the farming public? Farmers talk about biofuels differently in southwestern Ontario than they do, say, in the middle of Iowa. I've been to both places. I see it. I can feel it. What needs to happen in that regard?
I think yeah, I would agree with that. I think when you kind of take in the broader kind of Canada US trade conversation and dialogue that's happening right now. The ethanol industry between those two countries is almost the exact opposite. right? This is a case where both in terms of the volume of American ethanol produced by American corn that Canada is currently using, the volume is absolutely significant. It carries the economics in a lot of ways as well. I mean, the U.S. is in a situation where they're able to produce more ethanol than they currently domestically use. That's different than Canada's situation. So, when you kind of have open and unhindered trade in a lot of ways, there are benefits that come from that. But and kind of taking this more modern look at the dynamics of the market, I think that we don't want trade to stop. We don't want the benefits of ethanol to get stopped at the border one way or another. But we do have to take, some pages in terms of what other policies are doing internationally, and I think kind of keep pace and remain aware of where Canada is perhaps lagging or missing some
Yeah.
opportunities. So that's how I would kind of look at it, right? We need to kind of level up and fix some policy loopholes, and it's future building as well. Obviously, this is an inflection point for a lot of sectors, not just ours. But I think we've got to be forward looking and we have to be kind of bold and proud about the things that we can do here in Canada and do really, really well, and kind of seize the opportunity so that we can create things that have a much longer go forward benefit.
And at the beginning of the interview, you talked about how the timing is right for this new FFA organization, Farm and Fuel Alliance. Now, when you say that, though, I was thinking of the administration change in the U.S. and what's happening on the trade front. But one could also say the timing may be correct based on the fact that there's going to be an election in Canada, and there appears to be some political risk on where. Let's just assume the Conservatives form the next government. There's some political risk there because we've heard the CFR, the Clean Fuel Regulation, is a second carbon tax. So the timing possibly is right there from the industry's perspective to maybe change that narrative a little bit.
I think whenever you look at any sort of administration change, and the U.S. was going to have a new head of state regardless, because they had it kind of similar to what the Liberals are experiencing right now. One way or another, our current sitting prime minister is not going to be returning to the job after the next federal election. So, it's incumbent on everyone to make sure that they are, I think taking a very good look at the return on investment that government gets out of some of these policies. And certainly, I think that we are hearing both here from the current, Canadian political landscape and, kind of across, North America and probably globally at the rate that it's going right now. You have to demonstrate the clear value that your sector can deliver, to people at home.
Mm.
And you have to come up with ways where you can contribute. And again, it's going to take, fixing some loopholes and being more balanced in terms of how we develop our policies here. But we need to make sure that we are going to be competitive. And I think that means that everyone's got to be sharp and everyone's really got to be timely and everyone's really got to kind of look at the challenges that people are facing and the problems that they want to solve. So, hopefully, a lot of this exercise will be very helpful, right? Like I think it's germane to the international kind of context we found ourselves in since February. I think it'll be much more effective to have much more meaningful conversations with policymakers of all stripes, right? Provincial, federal, municipal. This is just going to be an expert body that's allowed to have much better, sharper conversations on that in a real time way. And I think we can, kind of take back some of the boldness and maybe some of the pride that hasn't really been front and center for Canada's ethanol sector for a while. And I think I'm like you, or of the opinion that maybe that's a little bit overdue. We do this really, really well here at home. We just kind of have to make more of an effort to be considerate in how we address these policies, what new policies we're building, and the type of future that we want to create for ourselves, because that's the window.
We've been talking to Andrea Kent, speaking on behalf of new organization just launched this week, Farm and Fuel Alliance. Andrea, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you so much.